Food at a culinary and gastronomic level is a key pillar of broader trend manifestation. So it's a great pleasure for me today to welcome to our 2020 online trend summit as an expert in this space, Shokofeh Hejazi, our senior content editor. Shak brings with her considerable expertise in food trends, together with her experience in retail and hospitality in the UK and overseas, to share with us the culinary and gastronomic trends for 21-22, from food philosophies and cooking techniques to cuisines and ingredients. Shak, it's an extra special welcome to this, our virtual stage for our 2020 summit. Welcome.
Hi, Charles. Thanks so much for that introduction.
No problem. So can you give us a taste of the future culinary foresight horizon?
Well, I'm certainly going to try. Hi, everyone. As Charles said, my name is Shokofeh and I'm a senior editor at The Food People. I'm here today to talk to you all about the wonderful world of cuisines. Now, for those of you that are subscribers to our service, when you log into Trend Hub after today to check out our 2021-22 framework, you'll see that there's actually an entire section dedicated to cuisines. In the first half of this presentation, I'll talk you through a couple of highlights from that section where we look at cuisine trends in the context of techniques and ideologies rather than just flavors and ingredients. In the second half of the presentation, I'll then pull out a couple of the specific cuisines that are really gathering momentum on the global scene at the moment, looking at trending flavors, ingredients, and dishes within those. But first things first, let's kick off at the beginning and why we think that the definition of cuisine itself isn't totally straightforward. Now, historically, when we say cuisine, we're often referring to the food of a geographical location. That's why we say things like Chinese food, Indian food, or British food. But times are changing and the world is getting smaller. Cooks from all four corners more than ever are exchanging ideas, techniques, and ingredients with each other. At The Food People, we think that as a result, we've actually entered into a new era of cooking where there are styles of cuisine defined by techniques and ideology rather than mere location. We call this the era of conscience cuisine. And in our wider trends framework, we break it down into three component parts: techniques, creative flair, and protecting planet. In each part, we delve into a number of particular movements and specific styles of cooking that are gathering pace, all with ethos and ideas at the core, rather than geography. I don't have time, unfortunately, to walk you through all of them today, since there's about a dozen. So I just want to pull out two of my favorites today, one from the technique section and one from creative flair. First up is technique, where I've pulled out fire cooking. It's been trending in the gastronomic scene for some time. Those of you that were able to attend our event last year will remember an inspiring presentation from Thomas Perry, who runs a bona fide fire cooking mecca in the form of his London restaurant Black Brat. But what's different and exciting this year is that fire cooking has really been embraced by the masses, and that means both home cooks and professional chefs are really embracing this. The most obvious iteration of fire cooking, of course, is barbecue, and it's no surprise that barbecue was a huge trend this summer, as consumers really embraced outdoor dining with gusto. But what's really exciting is that we're seeing even home cooks taking things up a notch on the barbecue front in terms of what and how they cook. Take the kit, for instance. Plain old grills were just a start. We're seeing home cooks embrace everything from pizza ovens to smokers in a bid to up the ante on their gastro status. And when it comes to what they're making with that kit, well, it ain't just burgers and steaks, guys. Even home cooks are trying their hand at doing things like charring fruit or torching meringue for a next level dessert, cooking breakfast on the barbecue, say, or even making Sunday roast in their pizza ovens. Meanwhile, professional chefs are totally tuned into the widespread appetite for fire cooking, and they too are kicking things up a notch by playing with what we call layers of fire flavor. That means flavors like smoke, roast, char, caramel, and more, all layered up together on one plate. The examples here bring this to life perfectly. As you can see, there's a grilled short rib with smoked bone marrow from Cafe Patchy in Sydney, charred sardines with burnt ginger vinaigrette at Orosai, London. Both totally compelling. Basically, more is more when it comes to experimenting with depth of fire flavor. A single dish can have flavors like char and smoke incorporated into the main sauce and side elements. And of course, let's not forget also about experimenting with global flavors and techniques when fire cooking. Consumer appetite for authentic and regional Mexican cuisine is bigger than ever, and in the fire cooking context, that means we're seeing Mexican barbecue and grilled dishes trend all over the foodie sphere. Things like carne asada, pollo al carbon, and grilled elote sweet corn. We're also seeing lesser-known Mexican ingredients like achiote spice, epazote, and mole become more and more mainstream. Another global influence that I'm super excited about in the context of fire cooking is the rise in popularity of Korean and Japanese barbecue. Both of these cuisines are really riding a high on the global food scene in general, and it's being bolstered by their exciting barbecue and grill scenes. In fact, they're gaining so much momentum that foodies all over the world are flocking out to buy portable charcoal grills to try their hand at making dishes like Korean bulgogi beef or Japanese yakitori in the comfort of their own homes. And of course, who could forget about good old American influences when it comes to barbecue? Again, consumers are well versed in the concept of American barbecue, but that just means they're more and more curious to take things to the next level. In the context of American barbecue, that means breaking down grill techniques state by state. Take ribs, for instance. Across the states, no two ribs are the same. Different regions all have their unique way of cooking ribs. There's low and slow hickory smoked ribs in Kansas City, spare ribs coated in thick sweet sauce in St. Louis, pecan or oak smoked beef ribs in Central Texas. And that's just the tip of the iceberg. Things like these global and regional variations, as well as chefs experimenting with fire on fire, all go to show the creative and culinary skill that can be applied to fire cooking. But guys, make no mistake, this is not a bells and whistles technique. As Swedish chef Niklas Elk said, who's a renowned master of the flame, says, fire cooking is an analog technique. That means it's about focusing on produce, flavor, and technique without modern technology and distractions. Now, of course, this is just one of the trending movements that we go into, and life is all about balance. So the next trend I want to talk to you all about is a bit of a departure from stripped back analog world of fire cooking. This one falls under creative flair, and it's what we call the breaking rules movement. Now, what do we mean when we talk about breaking rules? Well, in a nutshell, it's about rethinking the status quo when it comes to pairings and plating. That means taking formats, flavors, techniques, and ingredients from anywhere and everywhere and putting them all together on one plate. Essentially, this is a no-rules approach to cooking, which means that a new genre of truly global cuisine is emerging. I'm talking about 2, 3, 4, even 5 cuisines on one single plate, and no fear of rebuff. The key here is that it's all about appreciation rather than appropriation. This is what really sets the new wave of global cuisine apart from the clunky fusion cooking of the past. It's cooking without borders, or as Chef Ravinder Bogle describes her new globally inspired cookbook, proudly inauthentic recipes. Her book, Jaconi, is actually named after her restaurant of the same name, where she follows the no borders approach, throwing up eclectic combinations like those you see here. Stuff like sag paneer nudi or kimchi patatas bravas. And trust me, it really works. Another young chef that really embodies this approach is London-based Santiago Lastra. He made foodie headlines last month with the much anticipated opening of his restaurant, Cole. Santi is from Mexico, but has traveled the world for his culinary training with stints at top restaurants like Mugaritz and Noma. He eventually settled in London, where his aim was to bring authentic Mexican flavor and dishes to the city. But working in so many diverse environments taught him that about the importance of using local and seasonal ingredients in your cooking. Thus, he decided that his Mexican restaurant in London would use predominantly British ingredients. So at his restaurant now, you can expect dishes like langoustine tacos with sea buckthorn squeezed over top instead of lime. This just goes to show that global cuisine can be not only the inventive choice, but also the sustainable one. So, next question is, if you're a retailer or a restaurant, how do you apply this new global approach to cooking? Well, a good rule of thumb is to lean on simple and familiar formats as a starting point, especially comforting, crowd-pleasing dishes like noodles, sandwiches, tacos, or French fries. The examples here are great manifestations of this approach at its best. We have, for instance, a chaka bagel, which is a result of a collaboration between a Vietnamese restaurant and a Jewish deli in New York. It's a fresh bagel stuffed with Vietnamese-style turmeric fish, galangal aioli, yuzu kosho, and fresh dill. Equally addictive sounding are the Caesar fries next to them. These are from Birdie G's in LA, and the French fries are loaded not just with cheese and gravy, but instead anchovy lemon dressing, garlic breadcrumbs, cured egg yolk, and gem lettuce. And it's a bit cheeky, but I've shown this last dish in as a good example of embracing the no rules approach. The deep fried potato smiley face and caviar from Carter's of Moseley in Birmingham shows how perfectly any combination can work if it is appreciation and deliciousness at its core. There's no ingredient too fancy or too humble to be thrown in the mix. And for God's sake, guys, have a little fun while you do it. One restaurant that's really championing this approach is newly opened Kamika in New York. This exciting new venture fuses Japanese and Italian cuisine throughout its menu. It may seem strange to some, but in fact, Italian food is well loved in Japan, and there's a bona fide Japanese-Italian food movement where dishes like pizza and pasta are given a Japanese makeover. At Kamika, they channel this in the shape of dishes like sukumen carbonara, seaweed focaccia with nori butter, and tiramisu shaved ice, all of which you can see here. So you see, though fusion may have become something of a dirty word in gastroculture, it's actually given way to a new, much more authentic, truly global approach to cooking. As long as you have deliciousness and respect for all cultures at the core, there's no combination of cuisines, flavors, or formats that needs to be ruled out for being inauthentic. Just remember to keep your audience in mind when deciding how outside the box to go. To have mass appeal, dishes need to balance the familiar with the different just right. Now, from here, we'll move on to a couple of specific cuisines that are trending this year. And since we've just been talking about Kamika, it's timely that one of the cuisines I want to talk to you all about is Japanese. So here's the thing. The world is pretty obsessed with all things Japanese in general. In fact, Japan is said to be the fastest growing major holiday destination of the last decade and the 11th most visited country on the planet. And with Tokyo set to host the Summer Olympics next year, Japan's influence, including its food culture, is only set to grow. When it comes to food, there's already a well-established consumer appetite for Japanese dishes. Things like katsu, tempura, sushi, and ramen are in our mainstream lexicon. But guys, consumers want more. We're seeing chefs delve deeper and deeper into Japanese cuisine to bring other dishes and ingredients into that mainstream conversation. One thing we're seeing a lot of, for example, are Japanese iterations of comfort food. Indeed, this year was arguably the year of the sando. When I talk about sandos, I mean those cult sandwiches in the style of konbini, which are Japanese convenience stores. We've all seen Wagyu and egg salad sandos all over our Insta feed, but they were just a start. Now anything and everything gets a sando treatment, so get creative with your ingredients. Just remember that whatever you're filling, the must-have ingredient for a top-notch sando is shokupan, which is soft, fluffy Japanese milk bread. We're also seeing a lot of iterations of wafu or yoshoku dishes, essentially Japanese takes on popular European and American dishes like burgers, pizza, and pasta. Think katsu burgers with nori fries, like the version pictured here from Besu in New York, or spaghetti topped with cod roe and sesame, like that pictured from Angelina in London. And over in the Philippines, they've managed to turn even sushi into a warm, hearty comfort dish in the guise of sushi bakes. Essentially, all the component parts of sushi baked into a tray, which is then picked up using small pieces of toasted seaweed. In all these examples, we can see a no rules, no borders theme recurring. So follow suit, everyone. Get creative. Take any comfort dish and give it the Japanese treatment. Just remember to go all out and experiment with lesser known ingredients, because consumers know a thing or two about Japanese food by now. Try ingredients like umami-rich koji, umabashi pickles, or Hokkaido milk. For those of you that don't know, that's a milk from the northern Japanese island that's hailed for being super pure, creamy, and having vanilla-like notes to it. Perfect for things like soft serve and cream puffs. Speaking of which, it's not just savory Japanese dishes that are trending, but also sweet ones. Now, some Japanese sweets have already entered the mainstream around the world. I'm looking at you, fluffy Japanese cheesecake and sweet, addictive mochi. Those are just the tip of the iceberg. There's a world of Japanese-inspired sweet formats to explore, including super high-end, difficult-to-make patisserie, things like elaborate roll cakes and super laminated croissant. Of course, it doesn't all need to be elaborate and fancy. Brick toast, which you can see here, is also popular. Typically thick-cut toast doused with honey butter and piled with sweet toppings. The ideal brunch if you're happy to have a little sugar crash after. Mochi donuts are also trending. Yep, you heard me right. Sometimes called pondering, mochi donuts look like their traditional doughy counterparts, but they're made with tapioca or glutinous rice flour instead of traditional wheat. This makes them wonderfully stretchy and bouncy, not to mention naturally gluten-free, a real bonus. And staying on the carb tip, we've already talked about Shokofeh milk bread in the context of savory sandos, but we're also seeing it being used in sweet applications more and more, especially show-stopping fruit sandos like the one pictured here. It's hard to say whether it's breakfast or dessert, but really, does it matter? It's accessible, eye-catching, and colorful, a perfect trifecta, which actually also leads us nicely to our last topic. Now, last but not least, we're going to look at a cuisine that is also super accessible and vibrant, and that is Middle Eastern. So we all know that Middle Eastern cuisine, in all its diverse, vibrant, and fresh glory, has become part of the foodie mainstream in the UK. Just take hummus, arguably the best known and loved Middle Eastern staple. Brits eat more than 12,000 tons of this stuff a year. That's more than Marmite, in case you were wondering. With hummus leading the charge, there's actually now lots of dishes and ingredients from countries like Israel, Turkey, Lebanon, and Iran that have entered the mainstream lexicon. And increasingly, consumers are even understanding the unique and diverse flavors that each has to offer. Indeed, open any foodie's fridge and you might see things like falafel, baba ganoush, and tabbouleh sitting in there next to their eggs and butter. Meanwhile, open their pantry and you might see ingredients like tahini, halva, za'atar, ras el hanout, or Aleppo pepper next to their cereal and tins of tuna. And of course, let's not forget the other big contender for the best known and loved Middle Eastern dish, the kebab. Kebabs are a bona fide national obsession. Indeed, they were the Friday night fakeaway that many people tried to recreate during the first phases of lockdown. But increasingly, consumers understand that there's so much more to kebabs than just late night doner and chips. There's regional varieties, for example, and we see consumers getting better and better versed in the difference between, for instance, shish and adana, or kofta and kubide. There's plant-based iterations too, so our vegan friends don't feel left out. Things like celeriac and cauliflower shawarma are increasingly mainstream. We also see chefs feeling free to get more and more creative with the ingredients and spicing they use in kebabs. They're using seafood, game, offal, local and seasonal toppings, and of course, trying their hand at handmade breads and sauces. This is all brought to life by the examples on this slide, where we see the likes of duck kofta and octopus pitta. Some of these iterations are so creative and refined, they arguably even take us into the fine dining sphere, which is actually the next thing that I want to talk to you about. Middle Eastern cuisines are often associated with vibrant salads, fresh pittas, falafel, hummus, and of course kebabs. All completely delicious things, but arguably not exactly fine dining fare. Well, what we're now seeing is a new wave of Middle Eastern chefs and restaurants questioning the status quo. They are reimagining traditional dishes and Middle Eastern flavors through a thoroughly contemporary lens. And every eating occasion is being covered, from brunch to dessert. The examples on the side perfectly exemplify this. Smoked tuna with avocado and labneh from Taim in Sydney, for instance, shows how Middle Eastern flavors and ingredients can lend themselves to even the most delicate plating. Meanwhile, seared scallops with scorched cucumber relish from the Barbary in London shows how fire cooking can be used for so much more than kebabs in this cuisine. The same goes for the show-stopping tabbouleh roasted grapes with sesame brittle from Zahav in Philadelphia, something of a Middle Eastern food mecca as well. And fire cooking isn't the only recurring theme here, because another trend that we've already talked about that certainly has a role to play in modern Middle Eastern cuisine is, once again, no rules, no borders. As we've already seen, consumers really aren't scared to see lots of different cuisines on one plate these days. So increasingly, we're seeing this applied to Middle Eastern food too. Middle Eastern formats and flavors are being fused with global influences and vice versa. So if you fancy topping Korean fried chicken with a date glaze, take a cue from Labab here and go for it. Or take your brunch to the next level by mashing up Mexican-style fried tortillas and eggs with shakshuka sauce and feta. Or, and perhaps this is my favorite of all, load up your fries disco style with lamb bacon and roasted red pepper sauce, just like Laser Wolf in Philadelphia. Basically, it's something that's come up again and again throughout this presentation. The key this year is don't be afraid to think outside the box. In summary, and it's a fact that underpins so many of the cuisine trends we delve into in our framework, consumers are more knowledgeable and curious than ever. You might be surprised at just how open-minded they are, and therefore how creative you can be. The key, as always, is to keep deliciousness and authenticity as your core drivers. Beyond that, just have fun, because we all definitely deserve that this year more than any. On that positive note, I'll draw a close for today. It's been rather a whistle-stop tour, but hopefully there's plenty of food for thought in there for you all. Thanks, everyone, for your time.
Shak, thank you so much for that mouth-watering global and truly no rules look at the future culinary foresight horizon. It's great to see that despite some of the not so positive, broader forces of influence that we have around us, probably for the foreseeable future, that there's still plenty of scope for gastronomic inspiration and expression.
Absolutely.
Thank you so much for joining the virtual stage at our 2020 Online Trend Summit. Chat, thanks so much.
Thank you.